and welcome to our presentation on audiobook information. We have a special guest today, Christine Rendel. Um, she's been a narrator for how long now, Christine?
Probably about the last 15, 16 years. Very
Oh,
part-time in the beginning for a number of
great.
years because of another career, but I've been pretty much full-time right since the beginning of COVID.
Awesome. I'm going to turn it over now to Jody. She's going to be our moderator today, and it's going to be Ellen and Christine with the discussion. Jody, take it away.
Thank you, Kim, and thank Opus Literary Alliance Education Committee, particularly Kim Dyke, for your continued efforts to bring quality content to our membership. My name's Jody Zarambi. I am the Executive Vice President of Opus Literary Alliance, the publisher of two imprints, Desert Palm Press and Launch Point Press, and a published author under my pen name, Jazzy Mitchell. Today, it's my pleasure to discuss the process of converting a book into an audiobook from a few different perspectives. We will chat with Ellen Hoil, the executive president of Opus Literary Alliance and a published author through Desert Palm Press, who offers all her books in audiobook format. She will tell us the process she went through while deciding who to use as a narrator, what platform, and what she learned. Hello, Ellen.
Hi, Jody. How are you today?
Excellent. Thanks for being here. We also have our featured speaker, who is Christine Rendel, a British-born audiobook narrator living in New York. Drawing on a strong stage, musical theater background, and a lifelong love of books, she has narrated nearly 100 audiobooks for major publishers, as well as the smaller independent houses in a professional home studio. Thank you for being here, Christine.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Just a bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session and all Opus members will have access to it. Please keep yourself on mute while others are speaking, and feel free to submit questions and comments in the chat feature. We will ask your questions towards the end of the session if the speakers haven't covered those issues yet. Before we hear from Ellen and Christine, we have a short video to show you from Launch Point Press author Reba Birmingham, who narrated 3 of her published works in the Hercynian Forest series. And I asked her 3 questions to answer. The first one is, for those thinking about narrating their own books instead of hiring someone else, what are some of the benefits? Second question, what advice would you have to others that are going to do it? And specifically, what advice have you ignored that others have given her? And third, since it takes several days to finish narrating a book, what steps do you take to make sure you use the same voices, intonations, and pacing when recording? And with that, I'll have Ellen share her screen and let that video start for us.
Well, hello, Jody, my favorite publisher. Let's see how this works. You had sent me 3 questions, and myself and my cat will attempt to answer them. I am Reba Birmingham, the author of the Hercynian Forest series, and the first 3 books are on audiobook. I have 4 and 5 to do, and it does take some time. It takes about 3 days to narrate your own book, and I do narrate my own books. So question 1 is for those thinking about narrating their own books instead of hiring someone else, what are some of the benefits? Okay, I think the biggest one is definitely you put into the characters what you know they should be feeling. And maybe this is a little insecurity on my part. You get better as you write books. I think my first one is good, but when you speak it, you can make their personalities and quirks come alive. So I think that is really one of the biggest benefits. You can also, if it shouldn't happen, but this is, the real world, if you do come across an awkwardly written sentence here and there, you can fix it and say it how you wish it was written, and then get back to your publisher and perhaps get an update for the ebook. So our goal is to get better and better and to entertain. I look at everything from the reader's viewpoint and the listener's viewpoint in the case of audiobooks. And we just want them to have fun. That's the thing. All right, number 2, what advice have you ignored when narrating? Oh, you know me very well, Miss Zarambi. I was told, and I had a very intimidated experience. I was in the same booth used by John Gresham's narrator, and the same people were doing the production work. They're down in San Diego, and they're very good. Anyone can go there. I think they're called One now. They used to be called something else, but if you send me an email, I'll get you their info. Anyway, there I am, first time. I'm sitting in the same box as a true professional, and explain to the person doing the recording that I do have some characters with accents and I would like to do them. And I was advised strongly not to. Just don't. You're not a professional. Don't do it. You'll regret it later. You're spending a lot of money to sit here in this little booth, and don't do it. So I mostly didn't. But I think that when there's a character who's from another country and you can do that accent, it just kind of comes out when you're reading it. Now, I got feedback from people who only listen to audiobooks. They don't read the written materials that we lovingly publish. And there are those people, they're busy, they're in their car a lot, and they liked that part. And that's the best feedback I got was, when Hortense Miller starts getting on her horse, I mean, it just sounds better in her British high horsey tone. So in book 2, in book 3, I just kind of let it rip, and even had a part where I have a Native American woman doing some singing, chanting, while a person is in a sweat lodge. And so I just sang it as it was written. And I have people that really, really liked that. So I think just like there's a chair for every seat in the car business, there is also a reader that once they discovers you, they like who you are. They like what you bring to those characters. And they don't care if it's not, technically correct or super literary. They want to be entertained. So that would be my answer to the second question. And third, since it takes several days to finish narrating a book, what steps do you take to make sure you use the same voices, intonations, and pacing when recording? Okay, that kind of sneaks up on something I learned the first time around. Made a big mistake the first time around, went out to eat with my son who lived in the area, went to a noisy restaurant, spent all night eating barbecue and speaking loudly because there was a band in the background. Don't do that. So the first thing you want to do is get a tea that you like, something calming, maybe a little lemon and honey in that tea, and go isolate yourself for those 3 days. I think quiet meditation is probably the best. It also does allow you to be consistent, and you can practice when you're alone. You're not entertaining anybody else or thinking I'm ignoring my guests or whatever. And you're certainly not shouting over someone else in a restaurant while the band is playing in the background. So, for some of us, it probably comes naturally. Others, you may never read your own book, and that's okay too. I think it all has to do with, do you want to? And I wanted to, because I just want people to really get these characters. So that's enough out of me. I hope that helps someone. I would say if you at all want to read your book, go for it. Don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. You'll know later because you'll get feedback. And I think that if you really want to do it, then you should. Thank you very much for letting me come in and give my 2 cents.
All right. So Reba had talked about how one of the things she's learned over time is that one of the benefits is to be able to correct things within the book when she goes to record the audiobook, which is definitely a perk. And she also talked to us about how you shouldn't listen to the naysayers telling you not to do the accents, telling you not to sing, telling you not to do this or that. If you feel comfortable doing it, then go for it. The worst that will happen is that you'll have to re-record because it doesn't sound good. And she talked about how people had really liked those particular scenes within her books, and to take care of yourself while you're doing the recording. No, don't go out to a concert or something and use your voice for hours, because it will certainly affect your voice the next day when you continue to record it. So with that, let's go to our guest today. Let's start off with Christine. Why don't you provide us with an overview of the audiobook industry?
Well, as you know, the audiobook industry has just grown exponentially over the last few years. Enormous changes even within the last 3 or 4 years. And it's destined to exceed its 2 billion mark, and it is the fastest growing segment of the industry, far exceeding books now. And there's a lot of people now have come in. I was reading that it's something like 74% of people over 18 are regularly listening to audiobooks now at some time, or they're exposed to them. And this is a big difference even in the last few years. I mean, I remember when I first started doing audiobook narration, it was really considered quite exotic, quite rare. People just were not listening, they were reading. But I think as we've got busier and busier, and it's become so accessible now, and the formats, you remember in the olden days when you used to have to listen to cassettes. I remember when they were recorded on reel-to-reels, but we used to go around with a bag of cassettes, and you'd never get to the, you think you'd 12, 15 cassettes to get to the end of a long book or a series. That's all over now. It's so accessible, digital audio. It's so with us. So it's only going up, and that of course begs the question from a lot of people: who should be, particularly from authors, who should be narrating my audiobook, my precious book? A lot of people want to. We'll get into that later. A lot of people don't want to. A lot of people are very happy to leave narration to a professional audiobook narrator, but many people are exploring this as they should. So audiobooks are here to stay, they're here to double, and they will get more and more prolific. A lot of actors have come in now, particularly with COVID. When everything closed down, a lot of people sort of segued over into audiobooks. The people who were able to really more efficiently produce books during that time were those that already had home studios. And the majority of people I know had access to a professional home studio or professional studio, or had their own. I've had my own since, probably about the last 15 years. Excuse me. So
Sure.
I think that's an overview, really, very, very brief overview.
So if someone is contemplating narrating their own book, what's involved with that? Does it take more than just reading the book? What happens?
Yes, it's a short answer to that. It does. It's a very lengthy process. First of all, you have to read the book. And you don't read the book just as though you're skimming through the book. You have to really read the book in a quiet place. I usually take a couple of days to read a book. And I make sure that I'm completely on my own, as few distractions as possible. I have my pen and paper there because I want to be making questions as I'm reading the book. Now, this is all assuming I've been given a sample audition. I've auditioned, I've got the book, I've got the contract, I've got the whole thing. And bear in mind, I come mainly from the framework of publishing houses. I've worked with indie authors, but most of my work comes from a variety of publishers. So I've auditioned. Sometimes I've just been given the book, but generally I've auditioned for the book. I've got it, I've signed my contract, and now the book is in my care. I've been entrusted with this book. So the first thing I'm going to do is read the book very thoroughly. Some people will read the book twice, but I take a long time to read it, and I'm making notes. And I'm making notes of every character, obviously what's happening, the plot, every single character. And I'm reading the text carefully to see what the text is giving me, because the text gives you pretty much everything. If the book is really well written, you're also given a lot of descriptions about the characters. And the downside of not reading the book carefully is that you may do a wonderful job on this book, and you get to page 440, and suddenly you realize that the character that you made a Cockney or something like that, turns out to have a strong Scottish burr, and he hails from, the Highlands or something like that. Nothing like that had been revealed in the text thus far, but it does happen. So it's vital that you read the book. If anyone says, "Oh, I don't like to read the book because I want to be surprised at the end because it gives life to my reading," nonsense. You read the book very carefully and you plot it all out like a detective novel. Which voices are going to reappear? Who can you just give a few throwaway lines to, or who are going to be, as you think, major characters through the book and possibly through subsequent series? So that takes a lot of work. People have different ways of doing that, of plotting out the book. Sometimes they make a spreadsheet. I'm old school. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I like just to take my pen and my paper. I write it all down. I write the descriptions of every character. And then I take my iPhone and I repeat the same thing into my iPhone. So I give for every book that I've ever done. I hope I never lose my phone or access to my data. But I've got every book that I've done, and I've got the characters there. And if there are more series, more books coming, then I've got all that information there and I can adapt it. So you read the book, and then you're going to start narrating the book. The industry standard is, if you were taking this book, you as a narrator, and you were going to do, if you were going to do everything with this book, meaning you're prepping it, you're reading it, that's the prepping it, you're doing any research, and there's a lot of research involved in most books. Even if they're just straightforward fiction, there are place names, there are things like that. You can't make a mistake. So I've many a time had to call up a university, a college, a pub, a post office in another country, and just ask, how do you pronounce that town? Or that name, or that street name, or something like that, because you can't be wrong. And you don't always get that information from your author. In fact, you mostly don't. And certainly if books are coming through publishers, it's up to you as the narrator. It's my responsibility to do my research and to make sure that research is correct, because you really don't want a book coming back to you at the end when it's gone through proofing, when it's gone through the checking by the publishers, or it's gone to the author and it turns out that I've been saying Cholmondeley instead of Chumley, something like that. So you have to be really careful. So you narrate the book. It would go off to the proofer, who would listen to it very carefully. So you have to have it proofed. You're going to get any corrections that you need. You go to then it gets edited. So an editor has to go through the book. Perhaps there's a noise, a dog bark or something like that, or you've coughed or whatever. So that's a process too. And then the book has to be mastered, because the levels are all going to be a little bit different. So everything has to be evened out. That entire process, and then it's listened to again thoroughly. And that entire process takes, the ratio is about 6 hours to every finished hour of audio. And that's a long time. That is assuming that everybody has, that is assuming that you're doing the book. When I say you, I mean that the narrator is responsible for all these things. Now, for me, if I get a book from an indie author and they want me to do everything, I will farm out the proofing, number one. I want someone to listen to it. It cannot be my ears. And that's an enormous tip for anybody considering doing a book. Don't think that you can just listen to it, because your brain will tell you, your brain will not tell you you're wrong. Your brain will say otherwise. If I read it, I'm right. regardless of what the text says. So you send it out to be proofed. You send it to be edited, obviously, so it's it's all in line there, and then it has to be mastered. I can do all of those things, but I accept the proofing. I don't listen to it at first, but I choose not to do that. I outsource it. I let someone else do it because it's not the best use of my time. I can be getting on with doing other books and projects, and that's just the way I work. And I think most narrators, or many narrators, will tend to do that. So that's a long process. So if I were just narrating, so say an author has their book, and all right, it's they want to get a finished hour. You have to ask yourself, as an author, can I do this? Do I think I've got the stamina to do this? Because it takes a lot of stamina to narrate.
It sounds a lot like writers or authors, when they submit their manuscript, they think that that's it. They're just about done with the process, when truly it's the beginning of the process. And there's so many details, such as what you just listed, within the evolution of the product and finishing it, and have it be the polished, professional end result to give to the world.
That's exactly right, Jody.
Yeah, quite a lot.
A lot of work. So I would say for somebody who was thinking of doing that, the first thing I would do is consider, do you have the stamina? And all right, you think you've got the stamina. Okay. So have you listened to audiobooks? That's a question I would say every potential author narrator should ask. Have you really listened? It's really easy to do that. Just go to Audible. Or go to your local library, to Libby, and download the sample of the book. You don't have to pay for the book. Just play the sample and see if you like the sound of it. This is you get the sense, because a lot of authors haven't listened to a lot of audiobooks necessarily. I would go to Libby, actually, if I were thinking of doing this, and I'd just download a whole bunch of them, and then I'd just listen to them and see, okay, it goes on and on and on, and there's chapter after chapter after chapter. Am I doing that? And they sound pretty consistent. Do I think I can maintain that consistency? And you might be able to. There's some wonderful authors who are terrific narrators, but it's a different animal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was really interested listening to that lovely video. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear the audio terribly. But
Yeah, we'll do some audio magic and editing and try to get that louder for everyone.
But I heard it though. I've got keen hearing. But I thought to myself, well, if I were the author, I don't think I would want to give it my best shot and wait and see what the listeners thought about my book. I am so respectful of the written word and appreciate the effort that's gone into this baby, this book that's taken way longer than it will take me to narrate it. And I would want to be very sure that before that went out, and there was any question of anyone giving me any sort of negative response on that audio, that I'd done everything I could to make sure it was okay. So, I mean, I can't speak to deciding to do dialects or things like that, but those are just some of the things I would consider. Have you got the stamina for the book? And are you up for doing the length, the amount of work that it's going to take? And are you confident that you're going to do a crack job of this?
Right. Thank you. Let's get some perspective from Ellen. So, Ellen, tell me, why did you decide to make an audiobook?
I decided to do the audiobooks because I like the idea of making them available to people who have difficulty with the written word. I thought that would be a huge benefit.
Oh, that's great.
People who have difficulty reading, and so to do it that way, I thought was great. And secondly, I knew there was a big market out there for audiobooks at the time.
It does seem pretty popular, and from what I hear, a lot of people, they prefer audiobooks to reading, not always because they can't or don't enjoy, but more because it's a time constraint and they're able to listen to audiobooks while commuting or doing different things. So that way they can be exposed to more books.
That's one of the things. I was a big fan of out of England. There's Big Finish Studios, which does audio dramas for Doctor Who and some other sci-fi based programs. And I've just always enjoyed them. I've always enjoyed them, and I thought, this was an opportunity to sort of do something like that.
So what was your process for finding a narrator?
I did it off Findaway Voices. I do all my books on Findaway. You get to do a search for the narrator. It gives you a rundown of what their skills are, what age levels they tend to do, and things like that. You can listen to samples from different genres and books they've done. And then once I did that, I picked out about 10 people that I was happy with. And then I asked each one, what's your price range? Can I get a sample of when I decide to narrow it down, can I get a sample of what it would sound like on my book and go from there?
So I was going to ask you about that. What were the differences between the narrators? What stood out for you, and how did you narrow it down to who you would choose as a narrator? What was important to you?
I think most of it had to do with the tone of the voice, and the tone and the pace.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other big thing was, because it's not an audio drama, you don't have different people reading different characters. So in a group setting, and I would usually give this as the sample, was I want a scene where there are multiple people in the scene to see if I can tell the difference between each character and I can hear a different voice in each one, then I know I'm on the right path.
So you said that you gave them a sample to read for you. What was it, like a half of a chapter or a few
It
pages?
was usually a chapter, I think, on average about 300 to 500 words.
Okay. All right, cool. All right.
You went about, if I may say, you went about that exactly the right way, Ellen.
Oh, great.
And you also, you identified, of course, the whole thing when you're on a stage or when you're in an audio drama, you're a team, you're a crew. And when you're reading an audio book, in the main, if it's a solo audio book, you're playing everybody. So you have to, some people can do that very deftly. Other people have more of a problem, and you pick that up in the audition. So the key is you do what you did. You give them the most difficult part of the book. Multi-characters, different dialects, different things, action, male, female. It's vital. And then you get a quick sense of, well, how they can handle all that, because not everybody can handle it. They might be brilliant with one or two dialects, but they really can't sustain them. All their dialects will slip as it goes on.
The scene I had picked had multiple people, and it had included one teenager to see if they could do the teenager voice.
Yes, it's vital.
That's great. Christina, can you tell me, how did you get into narrating in the first place?
Well, my primary career for 50 years was healthcare. I was in nursing, and all walks of nursing, and junior, very senior at the end. But I'd always been an actor as well. So I was always in theatre, community theatre, whatever country I was in. And so I loved that. And then when I was in New York, and I'd done a little bit where I was living overseas, I had done a little bit of audio drama decades ago. And I thought, oh, I like that. I'd like to do more of that. And fast forward a few decades, and I did do some audio drama. And that gave me the inkling for, oh, I think I might take some narration classes. This is a long, long time ago. And I did, and I made a demo. And I got a job, and I was hired to work on a book, a multicast, or rather, is a book of stories, travelers, women travelers around through North America. I got that. I got paid for it, and I thought, well, that's really nice. I'll take a little bit more. I took some more classes, and I said, did another demo. I sent it out, and very quickly I got picked up by a publisher, Zondervan publisher, and they I think they still do mostly Christian audio, and so I got picked up for some series with them, and that was my start. And at that time I didn't have a home studio, but I very quickly got one after running around New York City trying to find a studio where I could narrate an audio book. Because audiobooks weren't big then, and studios, you couldn't just walk in and say, well, can you differentiate between a music production and an audiobook? So that didn't work. So that's how I did. But for the first few years, maybe 10 years, I could only do a book or 2 books a year, something like that, because my other career was too involved. But I always said that when I do retire, and this was right before COVID, I said, I'm going, and all the time I was taking classes, all through those years. Whenever I had a bit of downtime, I'd take some classes. And I've always read. And so, I had the studio. I'd had the studio for years. And then I went full time. And I'd made a lot of contacts by then. I've worked with multiple publishers and people. So that's what I've been doing. I'm not the most prolific of narrators. I take books that I like, and I work with publishers that I like, and I'm always busy. So I'm not crazy busy, but I'm always busy. So that's how I started, and I just carry on. And what I love is that acting on a stage won't give you is, I love all the multiple characters. When do you ever get the opportunity to play all these different roles? You don't. You've got your role on the stage and that's it, and maybe another one. So it suits me.
So how do you select a book to narrate? Like, do you
Well,
prefer a specific genre or type of character?
well, I might be offered a book from an author I already know. For example, if I'm doing a series, then I'm most likely going to get the next book in the series. I don't think it's ever happened any other way, but it could do. It could do. Things change, you know. So there are the authors I know and the publishers that I know. I like working in all kinds of genres. It's probably evenly split between nonfiction and fiction. I like history. I gravitate toward the topics that I like. And so that's, history and literature and more of the classics. But I also do thrillers. I do romance. I do lesbian romance. I did a great book last year called The Girls, written by a deceased British author, John Bowen. And it was just a great book, and it's old. And when you get a classic like that. So I like classics, any kind of classic literature, but I do new stuff as well. I do some quite avant-garde stuff. And I've just done some radio drama for a wonderful playwright, Andrew Biss. This was called The End of the World, and it was serialized, so it was in 9 series. So I like the challenge. I like archaeology. I like all those travel things, and I like a bit of everything, really.
That sounds great. It sounds like you can, when you're choosing, it can be really anything as long as you like it, and it's something that that gives you some passion towards the characters and the plots.
I think it's important. For example, I wouldn't be doing books that did not ally with my own particular political, stream, or I have some triggers, not many, but
Yeah, I
whatever
understand that.
I've got. So I would think maybe I wouldn't take this book, or maybe I would. But the best books for me are the ones where I am so kind of aligned with the author, because when you do a nonfiction book, say you're doing biography, something like that, it's so wonderful because you've got to channel the excuse me, the author. You've got to really honor that text. And you have to research and do a little something about the author, because you want to take their passion they've spent. It might be a book about widgets or something, or I don't know, something arcane, nothing that I might be remotely interested, the history of the button or something. But if I've got the book, then I better be interested in it, because this is the author's baby, and I need to make this book as good as it can be. So
Excellent.
I'm not going to take
Yeah.
something I don't, really think is just disgraceful. I just don't like that topic or whatever. There's
Well, as a publisher, I certainly understand that, because there sometimes I receive manuscripts and there's no way in hell that I'm going to publish them. So, that does happen. And if you're working all these hours on a project, you certainly want to be able to like what you're doing and be proud of the finished project.
That's absolutely right. And you'll never meet that author. You'll probably have
No.
certainly of a publisher. You'll have no contact with them, whatsoever. But nevertheless, I feel like there's this collaborative bond that, I've done the best I can with their book. And whatever the topic is, if it was the history of buttons, and I must make it clear, I have not done that book. By the end of the book, I think, well, that was really quite an interesting thing. Now I'd like to know more about the button, or something like that.
Right, exactly. Ellen, let's swing over to you again. Once you hired someone, did the narrator take care of everything from recording to producing to uploading to the various platforms, or were there parts of the process that you needed to step in and do too?
The part of I cheated a little bit. I'm going to admit that I cheated. The first 2 books I hired a manager to do it. So at that time in my life, I didn't have the time to deal with making the audiobook as much as I had wanted to. So she was the intermediary between me and the narrator. The narrator did everything. She did the manager, however, was in charge of uploading it to Find a Way and making sure it got released to all the other various platforms.
Cool. So she basically, so once the raw recording was given to you,
it was sent back to me by the manager to proofread or proof listen. I did that, and then once I gave the okay, it would then get uploaded.
Okay, so you would listen to it, okay it, or tell them what parts that you had a problem with or needed them to re-edit or whatever, and then they ran with it and they finished it for you.
The last book I did we ran into an issue. Thank goodness the character only showed up in 1 chapter. The character was Hispanic, and his name was Luis, but it was spelled Luis, and they kept pronouncing it Lewis. So we had to redo that chapter.
Yeah. And that's, I think, where maybe some sort of communication between the author and the narrator with how to say certain names or places would be valuable and save some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what platform did you use, Ellen? And how did you decide to use that platform instead of other platforms? I think you said Find a Way. How did you choose that and why?
At the time, I had decided I didn't want to use ACX.
How come?
Because I knew that once I used it, they would basically have the rights and lock it down for a certain number of years, and I didn't like that idea. It's the same reason I don't publish Kindle Unlimited. I don't want it to be owned by anybody other than me for a certain period of time.
So what is ACX?
I had researched different various platforms, and I had found Find a Way Voices. It had a large stable of narrators that I could choose from.
Yeah.
It downloaded to all the other platforms. So once I uploaded to Find a Way, it would go to Scribd, it would go to Audible, audiobooks, even some of the lesser known platforms.
Spotify owns Find a Way.
Audiobooksnow.com, like anybody that you could think of, the library systems.
Yeah, and so you mentioned ACX. What is that?
That's the Amazon owned platform, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. And how long was the process from hiring the narrator to releasing the finished product? Did it take months or? Do you
No,
remember?
it was a matter of maybe a month.
Wow, that's really quick.
Yeah, maybe a month and a half.
Okay. Christine, what platforms have you worked on, or is it not even something that enters into this whole process for you?
No. I haven't always worked, or I don't work exclusively with publishers. I haven't
Mhm.
worked on ACX for quite a long time now, but I have worked on ACX.
Okay.
In fact, one good thing about ACX is it has a lot of information for
Mm.
how-to stuff.
Oh, that's good.
I sometimes though so Find a Way. I haven't worked with Find a Way. The platform I work mostly with is Spoken Realms,
Mm.
which is owned and operated by a man, Stephen J. Cohen, who's the owner. And
Mhm.
he's also a narrator, publisher. Well, he's a distributor and publisher. I like Spoken Realms. What I do is that I often take a book in the public domain. When I've got some downtime, I'll say, okay, I found this book. I found the manuscript. It's way out of copyright, but I like it. It'll be an older book. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to take this book and I am going to be the producer and I'm going to be the publisher for this book. So I'll then do everything myself, but I'll give it to Spoken Realms. So they're my kind of ACX equivalent. And I might outsource. I'll use them as for distribution, and they have a deal with Blackstone, and it goes out like that. But when I take that book, I'll outsource the stuff that I could do if I wanted to spend hours mastering and editing and doing all that stuff. I don't want to do that. I want to get on and do more books and pay somebody else to do that. So I use Spoken Realms pretty much for the same reason I think I would have done it had I been in your shoes, Ellen. Yeah, I don't like the idea of somebody keeping my work and
Right. Yeah, I can understand that. And
I did.
so,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Christine. I was going to ask you, how do you decide on the specific voice or the tone that you use for each character? I mean, you talked about how you go through and you take notes and all of that. So, what informs you to create that type of character's voice?
The text,
Mhm.
the text, and pretty much everything you need to know is in the text,
Yeah.
assuming the book is well written. And if the book isn't well written, then you just have to you mine that you just mine that text to get an idea of what it is. But you get an idea. For example, you might find somebody might be described as having emphysema or difficulty breathing on something. Well, that's easy. Somebody might have a pronounced lisp or something like that, and or they might only have one leg, and so everything is going to go into whatever it is that somebody's going to have an effort with. So it'll speak to you. So that helps you. And then if a person's very short and bouncy and whatever, that level, it's the energy level. I always say that the most important thing about the text is it's not the words on the page, though. It's the subtext, because it's the subtext which we're all mining, right, to try and create these rounded, not just what's going on, but what struggles the characters are having. What forms the characters, or they are particularly, out, arrogant, bossy, whatever. So all of that fits into the character. That's why I write everything down that I can, everything I find about that character when I'm doing my prep, or how they interact with other people. So that's pretty much it. But you've got to establish characters that can be differentiated. The worst is having seven 18-year-olds, and they're all 7 boys and they're all talking together. How do you, or 7 girls, same thing. You've got to give them all some quality that they're going to be distinguished from one another.
Right. So you mentioned that you took classes every so often What kind of classes did you take? And also, as an aside, what kind of equipment do you use while doing your narrations? Do you have specific software that you use?
Yes, I'll address that first. So
Okay.
I'm in my booth right now. My booth is a vocal booth. It's a 4x4. It's, as I say, it's about 15, 16 years old. It's tiny. I've got all the little things that I need, all the little gadgets. And I use a Mac Mini. I have my Mac Mini outside my booth, and I just have a hole in the booth, and all my cords come through. And for a microphone, I use a Neumann TLM 102 mic, and I use Studio One. That's some people. These are just the names of the DAWs, the digital workload system, your system. So some people use Pro Tools. It's always been called the gold standard of recording. I'm not sure really why there's many other DAWs that one can use. A lot of people use Reaper. Some people use Audacity. It's free and you can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. I'm a creature of habit. I have used Pro Tools. I've used some of those. But for me, if I was only doing a book a year back in the day, maybe 1 year I wouldn't do a book. So by the time I got back to Pro Tools, I couldn't remember how to use it easily. And I found stuff that I could use, like I like Studio One. And so that's my equipment here. I'm still taking classes. I take classes all the time. Every narrator that I know takes classes. One reason we take classes is because we live in complete isolation, narrators. We're in our little booths for the main, and we just talk to ourselves. It's not a social endeavor, but we make it social because it's an extraordinary community. If you've ever known communities of audiobook narrators, we're very social, we're very generous with one another, and we're always sharing, and we're always collaborating. There are always classes, there are social media groups, what's the one that's gone right out of my head now? What's the Clubhouse? Forgive me, Clubhouse. There must be 20 narrator groups on Clubhouse. And then we all meet up. We have conventions, we have workshops. I just came back from an audiobooks at sea cruise, which was half pleasure and half learning. So we're always practicing, we're always getting better. Because that's the kind of industry that we're in. And we're competing now against AI.
Yes. I was debating whether or not to bring up the whole AI thing nowadays. What the pros and the cons are of using AI. What do you have to say about it?
It's a great question. I have nothing against AI.
Yeah.
But I do have some comments about AI and the arenas in which it's making incursions and trying to be used. We're all used to AI, right? We've got, we call the doctor's office, we get or the vet, and we get the AI voice, and we're all used to those voices now, and they're really getting very good, aren't they? I would say to everybody thinking about using AI to narrate their precious baby of a book, I would say, listen to some samples, go on Audible, because Audible's getting into it now, as you know. They've just announced in the last month that they're going to make heavy inroads into AI. Listen to samples and then read the listener comments on books that are AI. And
that's great. Yeah,
the
definitely.
other thing I'd say is AI is marvelous, and if there are some texts in which it's fine to have AI, I would think. If it was sort of how-to manuals or things like that, things where you've got to communicate dry information, you don't need a heart and a soul and all the rest of it. Where I think there's an issue is when you consider what AI can't do. AIs can't cry, they can't feel, and they can't make you feel. However well written characters are, they cannot have a human rounded quality that is capable of expressing emotion, however good the voice is. So
yeah, there's no heart and soul in an
No.
automatic AI voice. It's not there.
No, they will never replace a good narrator.
Mm.
Will replace a narrator who, is just mediocre or is
Just
not
reading the
bringing
words.
the best, is just reading the words. That's right. And they'll get better and better because they're cloning
Yeah.
voices and they're doing all sorts. But you just can't get away from the fact they're not human.
Mm.
I
Good
have no
point.
concerns about, certainly not in
Yeah,
my
they're not going to put you out of business, I don't think, Christine.
no.
Ellen, if it's okay to go on, Ellen, I just want to talk for a few minutes about the costs and about royalties and all of that, because we haven't touched that yet. And I know a lot of people want that information so they can understand not just the process of creating a narration for a book, but also how much it costs. So when you did it, Ellen, how much did it cost for you to record? You don't have to give exact numbers, but just a ballpark range. And then do you believe in your estimation that was worth the cost and why?
It cost me when I did my last book, which I think was 2023, Judy, was that? Yeah,
That sounds right.
2023. It was about $2,000 for the narration.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more. That's a lot of money. And so I did it up front because I didn't want, I'm an attorney. I don't want to do math. Don't make me do math. So the idea of trying to figure out royalty shares every quarter and do income tax, like the whole thing was just overwhelming. And I'm like, I'd rather just pay for it up front.
Mhm.
There is you can do partial royalty shares, full royalties. There are various ways to pay for it. And I just at the time preferred to pay for it up front. The only thing is that the having done it once and succeeding at it, after that, my publisher let me split the cost with them. So that now I got a higher royalty on my end, but they got a higher end on their side as well. So the investment was less than the first time, but it was still an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I've made the money back monetarily, I don't know, but I've certainly made the money back marketing because I sell more audiobooks than I do ebooks at this point in my life.
Right. So it's just a matter of how much.
I do, I make more I sell more audiobooks.
Yeah, so it's a matter for you of how much to put up front versus splitting the cost at the beginning, and then the royalty share is a little less for you to compensate for what the publisher paid out for you.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Yeah.
Well, yes,
So
no, I didn't do a royalty share.
Oh no, you did a
I did a full-blown upfront payment that I then split the cost with my publisher.
Okay.
So that my royalty is higher on an audiobook than it would be on an ebook because
Right.
I laid out part of the money up front.
Right. Yeah. So you split the cost, so you're getting a higher royalty at this point.
Yeah.
On each unit. Okay. So Christine, tell us what the benefits and pitfalls for being paid upfront versus royalty sharing, and do you do both?
Hang on one moment. I'm just putting something in the chat. I'm putting in
I see.
a resource
Okay.
by a wonderful woman. Everything you could ever want to know on the planet about audiobooks, about narration, with a very big section for authors. So I think that'll be very useful. And I should just say that I'm very happy to I didn't get a chance to do this before now, but I'm happy to provide a list of resources at the end of this over the weekend or perhaps by Monday. I'm happy to do. So could you repeat the question, Jody?
Yes. What are the benefits and pitfalls for being paid upfront versus royalty sharing, and do you do both methods?
Well, if you get paid up front, you're really lucky now, really lucky. So that's even in 23. That was a great thing, Ellen, for a narrator. Everybody wants to be paid up front. They just want a finished hour rate. And but that doesn't happen. It rarely happens. If I go and look on ACX now, mostly they're royalty shares or royalty share pluses. Now, all of the different contracts are spelled out pretty clearly because they're a little bit different as well between ACX and Findaway and, you know, other platforms. So rather than get into those, I'll just say from a narrator's point of view, upfront per finished hour rate is fabulous. But it isn't. It's usually a split royalty share.
I have one comment. Christine, you mentioned contracts, and I don't know how contracts work usually on the narration end of it. I, as an attorney, came up with my own contract that I had the narrator sign.
Mm,
Because
reasonable.
I'm obsessive like that.
Mm.
So we had our own contract going. I don't know what contract they were working off of, but I was working off the one they signed for me.
Yeah, a lot of narrators have they devise their own. But there are narrators that work all the time with indie authors and do a lot. One of them, who's also a teacher as well, I've studied with him. I studied nonfiction. Sean Pratt. He always advises narrators to do their own contracts, or you know, or obviously work with somebody. I mean, the thing is, you've got to have a contract, and it's got to work for both of you.
No.
And there's obviously nothing
Ellen,
wrong with your
always
contract.
the attorney.
Yes.
Okay, one last question for Christine, because we're almost out of time. Can you give us what qualities make a good narrator? Do you have some tips for aspiring narrators?
Well, you mean apart from, you have to be confident that you've got the stamina to do the job.
Yeah.
And you have to be a great communicator, and you have to be very responsible and appreciate that, you know, people are paying good coin for you to work on their book. And the thing that will always gum up the works is poor poor communication. Oh, that just reminded me of something, Ellen, when you were talking about Luis and Lewis. The best situation for a narrator is when the author gives a list of pronunciations, you know, because authors sometimes they do, but in fantasy and stuff like that, sometimes they have no idea at all, and they're quite happy for the narrators to suggest. Well, of course, it depends if it's a first book or the third in a series. And the best thing for a narrator to do is to either ask the author, remember to ask the author, or ask the publisher if you know if you can possibly get the pronunciations. So, you know, good communication, make sure you've got the stamina, and though the question is really about narrators, right?
Right.
So not the
Someone who
authors.
might want to be one.
Oh, just get training. There are so many wonderful places. The Audio Publishers Association, PANA, the professional site, all sorts. And then there are wonderful people who teach the art of narration. And it's an ongoing, as I said, it's an ongoing, and I'm happy to write some of those down. But I think if you take a look at the one that I did have a chance to write down, Karen Commons, the Narrator's Roadmap, first of all, it's free. Most of the information on it is free. There is a premium component with so there's more information for $50 a year, and it's absolutely just wonderful value. I mean, you could read that thing for a year and you'd still find new segments. So I know, I looked at it last night. I was looking at the authors section, and just incredibly generous human
That's
being,
great.
and really useful.
And I know you told us that you'd be glad to provide resources for people too, so we thank you. Should they email you at crendel@icloud.com?
Well,
Or do you have a different
it's
email
just
address?
me. Yeah, crendel@me.com.
At me.com, sorry.
Crendel@me.com. And you know, anyone can just always go to my website, but better, you know, with the website thing that you often don't get. I wouldn't fill in one of those forms there because often you don't get those. So just feel free to email me.
All right, great. And they'll get on your newsletter list, which is great. So they'll have that resource and they'll get the information from you, which you've been very generous to offer to give to anyone who wants it. And I want to thank you for being here today. So much information. I've just been writing down all this information, pages of it now. And also, Ellen, thank you for also sharing your experiences with narrating. That was so interesting and helpful for those who are writers and are thinking about having their books turned into audiobooks. So thank you, both of you, for being here today.
Pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. It was lovely, and good luck.
Thank you. And I think we've reached our hour, so we're going to go ahead and close it out today. For those who are watching, I hope that you will go ahead and contact Christine so that you can stay in touch and get that information you need. And of course, she's a wonderful narrator, so if you haven't checked her out for that, you definitely should. And Ellen, again, thank you. All her audiobooks are available for all her books, Ellen, so you should check that out too. Thank you all for being here today.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.